So, my brother used to have a saying. He would always tell me to expect the unexpected. And mostly because we would prank each other. And that was his way of warning me that he was going to get back at me somehow. Anyway, for landlords, the phrase expect the unexpected could not ring truer. Property damage is something we all think we're prepared for and that we've seen everything. And then something comes along that shocks the crap out of you. We have dealt with two floods, one to our studio and one to a single family home rental. Last winter, we had a branch that pierced the roof during a brutal storm and thankfully did not cause any issues in the unit below, but it cost us $650 for a roofer to come out and repair it. And I think the one thing Kevin and I are not thrilled with is the issue we had with termites. And not once, mind you, twice now. Welcome to your Landlord Resource Podcast. Many moons ago, when I started as a landlord, I was as green as it gets. I may have had my real estate license, but I lacked confidence and the hands-on experience needed when it came to dealing with tenants, leases, maintenance, and bookkeeping. After many failed attempts, fast forward to today, Kevin and I have doubled our doors and created an organized, professionally operated rental property business. Want to go from overwhelmed to confident? If you're an ambitious landlord or maybe one in the making, join us as we provide strategies and teach actionable steps to help you reach your goals and the lifestyle you desire, all while building a streamlined and profitable rental property business. This is your Landlord Resource Podcast. Hello there, landlords. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Your Landlord Resource Podcast. I'm your host, Stacy, and I'm here with my co-host and the love of my life, Kevin.
You sounded a little bit sarcastic when you said that.
Did I? I didn't notice that.
Man, if I do something like that, I get the evil eye.
As you should. I mean, you joke about everything, but you can't joke around about your love for me. Not when I'm in charge of the cooking and the laundry, anyway. You never know what might end up in your oatmeal or those jockey shorts.
Wow, you better be careful. You might end up on an episode of Dateline talking like that. Stacy stood at the stove, stirring a pot of bubbling oats with a thoughtful expression. Beside her, her husband watched. He knew better than to question Stacy's culinary adventures. After all, they had led to some of the most unforgettable meals of his life. But this was different.
Jesus, Kevin. I'm not threatening to kill you. I was more like giving you a stomach ailment or something, like, Dumb and Dumber, or like the bathroom scene or something.
Oh, okay. And you know what? That might be even worse. All right, so let's get on with this week's episode, which is the hidden costs of owning rental property.
The joys of being married to you. All right, focus. We can do this. So, as many of you already own rental properties, you might think this episode does not apply to you. Well, we are going to be discussing some hidden costs that come with buying rental properties, some that happen during ownership, as well as what hidden or unexpected costs there are when you're handing off your property to a property manager. So, stick with us here. For those of you just starting out, maybe you walked into a good deal and it cash flowed right away. And for us, we tend to prefer properties that need very little work and have basically no added value. So when we do our property evaluations, we need to make sure that we are fairly accurate with our predictions on numbers. A couple of times we have gotten caught either by underestimating an expense or just flat out not realizing that we would need it.
And let me say that if you're looking online at like Zillow or Redfin to find properties, please don't depend on the numbers they place in the ad. And same with a profit and loss statement you might receive from your realtor. Usually those numbers are what the current owner is paying, so they are actual expenses of the property to them and could be much higher for you. Good example, property taxes. So take the time to Google what the property tax is for the county you're considering buying in. When Stacy bought the LLC from her family, the property tax expense went up by like 50%. I think something like seven to $10,000 more a year that we weren't considering in our pro forma profit and loss estimates. Also related to property taxes are city government assessments. Now, those are usually not a lot, but it seems like once one is passed for something like street repairs, then another agency jumps into the mix with a school bond. And the next thing you know, you've added several $100s onto your tax bill. Now, we know this is likely not a material amount, but for one of our properties that we sold, the tax assessments were, I think, over 700 bucks. Again, that's $60 a month. And for many of you just starting out, that could be half your monthly cash flow. So please pay attention to tax assessments, not just the tax rate.
All right, something else to consider with property taxes is if your state or county offers a homestead property tax. So for us here in California, that's called Prop 13. And essentially, if you live in the home, the taxes increase minimally each year. But if you decide to rent it out, that home now becomes a business, which is exempt from being able to use that homestead rule. And your property taxes are going to go up significantly. And if you decide to sell it and you have not lived in the house for 2 of the last 5 years, you'll be looking at a hefty capital gains tax. So be careful when you convert your personal home into a rental. And another city fee that snuck up on us was a rental property inspection fee that we have to pay a per unit fee in Sacramento. Many cities require permits to operate any business, even for rental properties. Now, it's only about $100 a year, but 100 here and then 60 there can add up fast. When you're buying a new property, especially in an area that you're not familiar with, please do your due diligence and research all the fees that you have to pay to operate a rental property in that city or county. Were there any fees that we didn't consider when we bought in Idaho?
Let me. There was an HOA fee of 250 bucks, which we knew about, but what we didn't think about was the assessments they had on the books for painting the complex. No idea what that will be, but if I had to guess, it's going to be a couple $1,000.
Yeah, well, let's hope they hold off on that for a little bit until we can recoup some of that 10 grand that we had to pay for water heaters and toilets and microwaves and a washing machine in the last 90 days. Okay, which leads us to expenses for maintenance and repairs. If you have to hire out a professional to do repairs, the cost of that has gone up significantly. The hourly rate we're paying here in the Bay Area is close to 150 to 200 bucks an hour. In Sacramento, it's a bit lower, and in Idaho, much lower, closer to about $100 an hour, depending on the trade. And of course, we advise you to set aside 5% of your monthly rent for each of the following: maintenance and repairs, vacancies, and capital expenses like a new roof or a fence or a driveway. Those are your big ticket items. So that's 15% of your rents are going to go to those three items. And guess what? It takes quite a while to build those reserves up. By the time you actually save the amount you feel comfortable with, the amounts needed to cover such things as a new heater or a month or two of unpaid rent have increased exponentially.
And you know what? It never seems like it's enough.
I know, sadly, it's not. So, with your expenses on things like utilities and labor really increasing and rents not increasing at the same rate, you need to be sure that you have a way to cover yourself just in case.
Yeah, and one expense that we've really seen climb is our insurance rates. I mean, we don't file claims often, and well, actually, I think we've only filed once, right?
Yeah, for the flood in the Chico house.
Right. But we've had liability insurance and umbrella policies as well as our cars. I mean, they've gone up a lot in the last few years. And I include the car only because you should understand that your personal expenses will increase. So if the amount you earn from your rentals contributes to your personal income, think about standard increases for those items as well. Another thing to consider is if you have a single family home rental that was once your personal home and you have not transferred that policy to a business policy to give you proper coverage, you're going to have a rude awakening on the price increase there. Policies for rental properties generally cost about 25% more than a standard homeowner's policy because the landlord needs more protection than typical homeowner. If you'd like to learn more about insurance for rental properties, we did a couple of episodes on this subject, and I'm being told it was episodes 20 and 21. We'll link them in the show notes if you'd like to go back and give those a listen. So, where you might experience some of this prior to buying properties, if you're looking to scale and grow, you will need to consider the cost of purchasing a property, rental or not. The cost to do an inspection, transfer fees, property taxes, and closing costs can add up quickly when you're purchasing a property.
Yeah. So we have a family member getting ready to buy their very first rental here. And we've been working with them on what to expect and how much money they're going to need to do this transaction. And they completely forgot about all of those items that Kevin just mentioned and found that they really only had enough to do a down payment and not the additional fees that it takes to close the deal.
And don't forget about buying down points if you have the opportunity. That can be a big chunk of cash that many don't consider. So that leads us to our next point, and that would be legal fees. If you have a real estate attorney on your team, those legal fees can add up very quickly. I believe we paid around $4,500 for our lawyer to oversee the transfer of the LLC into Stacy's name. So think about it. You can incur legal fees for such items as dealing with a legal battle if someone sues you for an injury on your property, evictions, advice on how to handle a difficult tenant, assistance with your lease for items that may not be covered in a pre-formatted state-specific lease. Let's see, there's title transfers when you co-own your rentals with partners, or creating or putting the finishing touches on an LLC you created. These are all things that can cause huge problems if they aren't dealt with properly, and they are all issues that we have leaned on our attorney for at one point or another. Real quick though, if you're interested in creating an LLC, you might want to take a look into Nolo LLC Creator. Nolo publishes a series of comprehensive do it yourself legal guides, and one of those guides is how to create your own LLC. Now, is this the same as using a lawyer? No, not at all. But there are a lot of things you can do to save money that a lawyer will charge you upwards of $400 an hour to do, like fill out state required paperwork, file the reservation for your business name, and create your operating agreement. So, is it a good idea to have an attorney look it over for you? Hey, absolutely. We are in no way suggesting that this would replace what a lawyer can do, but there are a lot of items the lawyer will charge you for that you can actually do on your own. For $49, you can get all the papers you need to get you started and familiar with the process. And if you're really savvy, you can do a lot of the footwork yourself before getting your attorney involved. We will link Nolo in the show notes for you to check them out. And I believe when you click our link, a pop up window appears with a 10% off coupon, bringing the cost down to $45.
Yeah, it's not a bad deal, honestly. And they have the program available for most states at this point, and that is really helpful. All right. So, my brother used to have a saying. He would always tell me to expect the unexpected. And mostly because we would prank each other, and that was his way of warning me that he was going to get back at me somehow. I should you miss that guy. Anyway, for landlords, the phrase expect the unexpected could not ring truer. Property damage is something we all think we're prepared for and that we've seen everything. And then something comes along that shocks the crap out of you. We have dealt with two floods, one to our studio and one to a single family home rental, just 2 weeks after we had finished a beautiful remodel. We had a tenant with a leaking washing machine and never reported it. And then when they moved out, we were doing the final walkthrough. Water was squishing out from under the vinyl plank flooring and the bedroom carpet. Mold had grown up the wall behind the washer, but the tenant had no idea on how the water got there. Must have happened after I moved out. Yeah, right. Last winter, we had a branch that pierced the roof during a brutal storm and thankfully did not cause any issues in the unit below, but it cost us $650 for a roofer to come out and repair it. And I think the one thing Kevin and I are not thrilled with is the issue we had with termites. And not once, mind you, twice now. We had a tenant discover them in their unit recently and found out they were back and coming through the walls of the unit. And spring is swarming season for them, and they were trying to get out so that they can go find another nest to build. This time, they were subterranean, so no circus tent like we had to do last time, but a ton of work for us to prep the crawl space, basement, and the perimeter of the home for the pest control company to come in and do their thing.
We wish we were making this stuff up. And, well, don't forget the huge hole in the wall that the huge bodybuilder guy tried to patch up. Poorly, but I guess he tried. And of course, countless instances of pet damage of which we don't allow pets.
Yeah.
The point is that stuff happens and you have to deal with it. More often than not, your reserves will barely cover something because it seems like it happens all at once. This year alone, we've spent over $15,000 on unexpected occurrences for only two of our properties. So, cash reserves are no joke, you guys. Check out episode 28 for our cash reserves blueprint. We'll link it in the show notes for you. Okay, on to costs that many of us do not consider for vacancies and flipping a unit. So for us, lately we've been very lucky about getting qualified and good tenants quickly into our units. But in years past, it wasn't so easy and we could easily go 3 months at a time with a vacancy. Are you prepared for that? To still cover your mortgage if you still have one? Or utilities, taxes, and insurance payments? What if you go into your unit like we did and there was very serious damage that would take a few, or in our case, 6 months to fix and remedy? During the pandemic, we felt we were pretty lucky compared to many other landlords. We only had one tenant who was not paying our rent, but he did not pay for over a year while he was out of work. Now, this was one unit out of six, so the rent from the other units were able to cover his unit. But as a result, we could not reserve as much as we budgeted for because we didn't have the income to set aside. We could cover our expenses, but that was pretty much it. And flipping the unit between tenants is something that many self-managing landlords don't consider. The unit has to be painted, or at least spot painted. Carpets need to be changed, or at the very least, steam cleaned if they were only used a year and there were no spots. You might find that you need to do some updates, like buying new appliances, changing worn window blinds, or even updating the lighting with LED-efficient fixtures. And then there comes the cleaning, and that, of course, is not expensive unless you are hiring out for it. But it takes quite a bit of time to really do a solid deep clean to a rental property. We have said this many times, and if there is one solid piece of advice we can offer, it's to clean your units thoroughly. So many times we have prospects walking through and they are in awe of how clean the place is. That cleanliness not only allows them to move right in without having to do any prep themselves, it shows them that you generally care for your rental property and want to make a good impression. And I'll tell you, Stacy does most of the cleaning. She is in there vacuuming drawers out before spraying them with Clorox bleach cleaner and wiping them clean. Same with the bathrooms. Not one surface goes uncleaned. The refrigerator has all the shelves and drawers out so she can wipe the whole interior down, then clean and put back the shelving. Those things look brand new when she's done with them. We remove all the switch and plug covers and wash those too. I mean, you'd really be amazed at how clean that helps a wall look.
So, this cleaning, let alone all of the things that we have to do to flip a unit, is not something that can be completed in a day. I mean, it can take the two of us several days to get it ready.
And as we've discussed hidden costs, we have found someone who can clean our units really well, but she doesn't come cheap. I mean, we're looking at a couple $100s for an apartment. So now, more often than not, we're paying her to come in and clean so we can get some of that time back.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you do have to consider what is best for you. Paying someone to do work that you can do so you can use that time to do something else, or do the work yourself and save having to draw from your reserves. Now, consider the cost of marketing the unit. For us, we do fine using Zillow and we do pay for the premium listing. We find that marketing the unit across a bunch of sites just made things really confusing for us. And Zillow gets our listing out to Trulia and HotPads as well. So there's a little perk there. We stopped advertising on Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist because the level of client that we prefer, they're not looking on there. And it seemed we always had prospects that wanted to haggle on the price or wouldn't follow through on our pre screening questions. So we just stopped using those. The cost to pay for a premium listing is around $30 a month. So consider that small fee on top of cleaning and upgrades and any repairs that you have to do in order to make your rental more appealing to those prospects.
And don't forget about the welcome gift.
Right. And we leave a small gift for our tenants too. Flipping a unit can run you several $100s and even into the thousands, depending on what you need to fix. This is why finding the right tenant and creating goodwill are super important when having a good tenant. You see, Kevin and I work hard at making sure that our tenants have a good experience while living in our units. Just last week, we did our spring half yearly inspections. And when we left each unit, I left a bag of wool dryer balls for them to use in their clothes dryer instead of dryer sheets. I left a small piece of cardstock with it, and that explained what they were for and why we left them as a gift. And this cost us about $8 per unit. The tenants came home and saw that we had left them a gift after being in their unit, and most all of them sent a text message expressing gratitude and appreciation. Some of them had heard of dryer balls before and were excited to use them, and some had no idea what they were even for. We'll link them in the show notes for you, but the long and short of it is people like to get gifts or stuff for free. It makes them feel good.
It does. And I will say we treat our tenants much like Airbnb hosts treat their guests. We try to communicate well and leave our tenants feeling good about us and living in our units. I like to think that is why we've had 3 tenants renew their leases, each with increases of around $100 a month in the last 30 days.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? It makes me happy to make other people happy.
Yeah, I think it's all about gratitude, right? And recycling our profits back into the properties to increase value in a literal and a fundamental way, too. All right, let's move on. Only a couple more things we want to talk about today. And one is, and you know we have to say this, preventative maintenance. So many investors do not account for performing preventative maintenance. And let's face it, much of preventative maintenance is about time, right? You have to take the time to inspect, research, repair, and then track the issues that come up. I mean, theoretically, you should know about how much time you have left on a roof or if the fence posts are loose and show signs of dry rot. You can see there may be an issue with the way your gutters are draining and problems that come from water intrusion on the fascia boards. If you have hardwood floors, they need to be treated with Varathane every few years to keep them looking nice and not super worn in pathways. And maybe you're super handy or a contractor by trade, so taking care of things like this are not an issue because there are no labor fees. But if we had to guess at what we had to put out to our California contractor per year on doing maintenance and repairs, I'd say well over $10,000.
Oh, easily. Now, last year he was remodeling 2 units for us, so it was way higher. But it's rare not to have a month where we spend, I don't know, at least 500 or $1,000 for his time and materials.
Exactly. But again, we are trading our money for his time, leaving time on the table for us. That and we have no idea how to do 90% of the things he does. And that's not to say we don't step in and do stuff instead of paying him to do it. We just did that on the single family home where there were a bunch of spots that needed to be painted because he had to repair some cracks in the plaster. He knows how to do that, and I know how to paint. So instead of paying him $75 an hour to paint like 4 different areas, all with different colors, I just did it myself.
Yeah, I mean, that's correct. And I have repaired toilets and I have hung up light fixtures. We do what we can when we have the time to do it. If we can use our time to make more money than it costs to have Jim go and do the work, we will. All right, the very last thing we're going to talk about today is the fees that landlords do not consider before they hand their rental property off to a property manager. And we're not throwing shade against property managers. We are property managers as well as investors. However, much like many businesses, we survive by charging additional fees to the owners and the tenants. So here are some of the fees charged to the rental property owners. We charge an initial setup fee, and this fee can be upwards of 500 bucks. It is to establish an owner as a new account, notify all the tenants of the change in management, and sometimes we'll include an initial inspection of the property for us to create a baseline on the condition of the unit. We charge a tenant placement fee, and this can either be a flat rate or a percentage of rent. For the latter, it is typical to charge around 50 or 100% of 1 month's rent to place a new tenant. The fee usually includes advertising costs to find that tenant, tenant screening, move in procedures, and preparing the lease agreement. There is sometimes a vacancy fee. This could be a one time fee of 1 month's rent up front, or it could be a fee per vacant unit, like 50 bucks a unit. Okay, eviction fees. If you want your property manager to file and see through a formal eviction, you better plan on paying a fee for it. Expect to pay a few $100s for them to oversee each eviction, plus any associated court costs. If there is an early termination fee, and this fee varies by management company. Much like breaking a lease, you can expect to pay as much as the total fees left on your contract if you want to break that contract with a property manager. There are a lot of variables that make up property management fees, like the age and the condition of the rental, the number of units there are, how much responsibility you're handing over to this new management team. And as landlords, we want you to know that the overall property management fees can be much higher than you think. So before you hire someone to manage your property, find out all the additional costs so you can budget correctly.
All great points.
Thank you.
So, today we've gone over fees that investors may not consider when purchasing a rental. I mean, investing is fun and exciting until it's not. So, here's a summary of what we discussed today. Before even buying a property, know what your petty expenses are: your mortgage, insurance, and property taxes. Learn what you have to pay during your due diligence and at the close of escrow. Be prepared for making sure that you have ample reserves right up front. Always be ready for unexpected damage or maintenance or vacancies. Think about who will do the work when you are turning a vacant unit, and budget for all that needs to be done if you don't have the time or desire to do the work yourself. And lastly, if your desire is to hand your property off to a property manager, you better understand what their fee schedule entails. To learn more about hiring a property manager, check out episodes 39 and 40, where we did a two-part series on the 50 most important questions to ask when hiring a property manager. We will link those in the show notes.
And for those episodes, we did take all the questions plus more and created a questionnaire for you to purchase and use. We'll link that in the show notes as well. All right, a few more review notes for you guys. Get a great team in place so you can estimate what something's going to cost. When you work with people enough, you can give them a quick call or a text and ask them around what it's going to cost to replace a water heater. And because they're familiar with the space and your preferences on how you expect that job to go, it's not hard for them to toss out a number that's pretty close. You want to do your research. Learn more about basic monthly expenses for a rental property in your area, including the anticipated property taxes, the HOA admin fees, and other property specific costs like rental property permits or inspection fees that are from the city or the county. Learn about laws and regulations. Know your rights as a landlord and the regulations of owning a rental property. This will help you understand which permits and licenses you need to comply with laws and avoid liabilities. The bottom line is running a rental property comes with its own set of costs, some expected, some unexpected, just like any other kind of business. You must account for all associated costs, not just those obvious ones, in order to ensure that your rental property is as profitable as possible. Well, that is our show for today. And hey, we know we throw a lot of info at you, and we appreciate you take the time out of your busy day to listen to what we have to say. It really does mean the world to us that you find our content useful. We have several free downloads for you to enjoy. We'll put a link to them in the show notes. But Kevin and I are in the process of creating a new course called From Marketing to Move In: How to Place Your Ideal Tenant. And we've opened a wait list for anyone who might want to learn more about it when we are ready to launch. We'll link that waitlist sign up in the show notes for you as well. Also, we'd love to connect with you outside of the podcast, so check out the show notes for links to our free weekly newsletter, our private Facebook group, and our social media sites. Again, thank you so much for tuning in, and until next time, you've got this, landlords.